All right, Chase, let's go ahead and kick this off.
Hi.
Thank you all for attending this webinar. Chase is going to go into the CBD and hemp market and talk about some of the trends that we're seeing here at the Jacobsen. I'm George Morris. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director here at the Jake. And Chase is going to start this off, and we're going to do a little bit of screen share on this as well. We're going to have Chase talk for 15 minutes. As he's talking, if there's any questions you have or observations, feel free to drop them in the QA section. And then I'll go ahead and moderate them with Chase at the end of his presentation. So with that, Chase, can you go ahead and start us off?
I can. Thank you very much, George. I appreciate it. George provides a great deal of support to all of us analysts at the Jacobsen, and we're grateful for that. Thank you all for joining us as we explore the hemp markets and pricing trends that we're seeing from the Jacobsen's perspective. The Jacobsen has been reporting on the hemp market since July, later July. So that is that's the extent of our data in the hemp markets. But at any rate, looking forward to providing some relevant and timely information on the markets. I know many of you have significant financial interest in these markets. The hemp markets are really uncharted territory. There's really no precedent with our other ag commodities, and predicting the markets can be very challenging. With our other mature commodities, we do market outlooks and they're data driven. So much of what we're sharing is anecdotal, what we're seeing based on trends and the data that we have right now. In general, pricing has dropped by half since planting time. And George, if you have some graphs there.
Yep. Popping them up.
You can see that, this definitely lacks perspective. This is a micro trend. We don't have seasonal trends to show, but obviously we know that pricing has dropped by half over the period. Biomass futures, quote futures, really forward contracts, started to show up about mid-summer based on this year's crops, below the $2 a point per pound price point, PPP. And this kind of pricing and futures or forward contracts are really a consensus on what pricing will be. And that is in fact the pricing that we're seeing on spots right now in the biomass market under the $2 mark. Isolate, again, this is unique in that isolate inventories, there was a major backlog with extractors, and I think about midsummer, they started to see and started to feel anxiety about this, and pricing on isolate has dropped significantly since then. I believe you have a multi-region, for CBD isolate. As you can see in this trend, this reflects the various regions that the Jacobsen is reporting on now. These regions will change as time goes along and the markets evolve. But as you can see in this trend here, these markets are consolidating and coming together from the various regions as the pricing drops down towards the 3,000 mark, with many trades well under the 3,000 mark.
Do you want to switch it to hemp oil, or do you want to stay on isolate?
I think just isolate, and that's probably, go ahead and switch to hemp oil. We'll look at that, and then I'll move on to supply and demand issues. Again, here we see some consolidation. Crude hemp oil has, and this pricing includes both refined and unrefined, meaning non-winterized, decarboxylated crude. That pricing has held steadily. I think much of this was converted to isolate, and that's where much of the backlog was. But we're not seeing the precipitous drop in pricing in hemp oil overall, particularly over the past couple of months. Thank you for those, George. Appreciate that.
Yep.
So as far as supply and demand, a lot of discussion over supply in the market this season. Acreage. Talking about the increase in acreage, we see something over 500,000 acres permitted. We estimate that maybe a couple 100,000 of those acres were planted and produce a stand, and furthermore, we expect about 100,000 of those acres to actually be harvested. Um, of that 100,000 acres harvested, the yields would be quite variable. About a quarter of those could be 300 pounds per acre or less. Another quarter might be somewhere in the 700-pound range, and then another half of it in between 1,000 or 1,250, bringing it to about 800 pounds to an acre average yields for CBD hemp this year. There's so many new growers out there that are realizing that getting seeds in the ground and getting a crop to maturity is just the beginning. Getting it out of the field, getting it dried, and producing a product that's over 10% CBD and marketable quality is a very tall order for many producers, and many have struggled with that. And some of the major producing areas with mature markets where they've been producing for several years, such as Southern Oregon, there are estimates that only a third of that crop has been brought in. This could be misleading because as you go by these crops, many of them have been topped out. The flowers harvested, leaving a great deal of the biomass. Some will harvest that, some will not. A lot of it's degrading in the field. But overall, we expect the total yield across the country to be far lower than we anticipated. And really the real question is where is the product located in relation to active markets? We know that that processor capacity does not necessarily match production right now. So this is another unique aspect of this industry. And so location is key, but also what product will remain available in the second and third quarter of 2020. Producers that are able to store and provide marketable material in the summer, spring and summer, which is when we saw price increases this year, will have a major advantage. But location will also be key, and as shipping costs will have a major effect on overall pricing. And then what will the actual yields be? Yields are easy to overestimate. I was a farmer myself, and it's tempting sometimes if you have a field to say, oh, well, it was 150 bushel an acre field, but there were sections that did 225. So until we get very consistent yields based on homogenized biomass at 10%, then we don't really have a good reflection of actual sellable product that's going to be in the supply chain. These are some of the major points that we look at when we look at the CBD hemp supply. Of course, we don't have the data that we have for other commodities provided by the USDA and state departments of agriculture. So much of it we have to work based on estimates. Now, as far as fiber, there are pockets of production around key processors. There are very few of those, but some of these processors have really stepped up their buying with new products in the marketplace, and we look for that activity to continue. But certainly less than 10% of the crop this year would have been planted to fiber, and probably less, somewhere on the order of 10,000 acres or less. This is sold as retted and baled straw, and we price that by the pound. This is obviously, these business deals are written by the ton, but in our price reporting, we report by the pound. And this is, again, retted and baled straw that still needs decortication. In the grain markets, Canada still dominates these markets. They have historically dominated this market. The Plain States certainly have the expertise in producing food grade seeds, which is much more challenging than producing grains for conventional livestock markets, in that the seed is very volatile and goes rancid easily. So the handling on hemp seed grain can be challenging. So we expect that the Plain States are going to have an advantage here in the grain markets. And while there's activity in the Southeast, it'll be far more challenging for producers with current genetics to produce similar yields based on the production that we're seeing from Canada and the Plain States. And so that's a general snapshot of the supply side. I breezed right through that, but as we can see, um, the kind of numbers that people have feared and oversupply may not materialize based on all of these factors. And far more people that have produced a good crop will not be able to store it and deliver a marketable crop in the second and third quarter of 2020. On the demand side of CBD, we estimate that about 50% of the retail CBD products are North American corporations, larger corporations sold in major markets. About 30% of these products are imported. These are products you might find in convenience stores and other markets, and about 20% small local artisanal produced products. We expect the major retailers to drive demand. Isolate topicals are now being sold in a number of markets: Walgreens, CVS, Dillard's department store, Harris Teeter, and others. They've been slow to adopt, particularly based on regulations, which I'll talk about in a moment. The consolidation in these channels will allow us to track the retail demand more closely. Right now, there are so many different channels for sales. Yoga stores, golf shops, chiropractors, that it's difficult to track the retail sales of CBD right now. And most of what we have are estimates. But retailers in general and their bankers need more confidence before they enter into these markets. And some of that may be on the horizon here. In fact, one major development today. Food and beverage.
What would it be that would give them more confidence?
Right. So the things that are major regulatory aspects, and I'm going to go into that in just a minute. But one key factor are USDA regulations, which were just announced and released today. Those are interim final rules, which are not, that will have the ability to change over time. FDA regulations, CBD's legality is still questioned. And as this relates to banking, the Safe Banking Act that passed the House, and it's unknown when that will go, or if that will go on the Senate floor with the current political environment. So those are key things. I'll cover those just a little bit more as I go along. But overall, these these companies see a chaotic and unsettled market with unclear regulations and increased risk. The food and beverage segment, we expect to see major demand there. If companies like AB InBev, Constellation Brands, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, when they move into these markets, we could see massive amounts of CBD isolate or the water-soluble equivalent into the market, and that could drive demand significantly. Some of these are moving forward in Canada, which tells us that that these companies, well, we know they're fully invested and that they are expecting to move in these markets and develop products as soon as they get the clearance with regulations. So the key regulatory factors, USDA today, the USDA announced, released their rules that have been at the White House since September, I believe. And so that's exciting for the industry. I haven't had a chance to read through these rules yet, but bankers and insurance companies alike have sought clarity here so that they can understand what separates a legal hemp crop from an illegal marijuana crop. So this is key. The FDA is also key. Don't expect that regulations from the FDA will be quickly forthcoming. There's no precedent for that, although there is some hope that that we'll see at least some interim guidance from the FDA in the near future. So be on the lookout for that. But some clarity there will allow manufacturers to start production on products that right now they're reticent to do to start. Okay, and as I wrap this up, so extractors, we talked about their major backlog, and expect so capital is really slowed and dried up for many of these extractors, but perhaps in the beginning of the new year, if they're on a calendar year, fiscal year, that will free up some funds and we'll see increased purchasing from extractors in the first quarter. But the lower pricing will definitely increase efficiency and overall profitability. So that should help with extractors' business models. We do hear whispers about giants like ADM entering the market. If ADM, Archer Daniel Midlands, enters the market, then we could see significant demand. And then just to wrap this up as we move into questions, on the fiber and grain side, there's a handful of industrial manufacturers for wood and plastic composite products. And if corporations like Patagonia and others drive this demand, we could see an increase, but it'll take 5 years for the supply chain for fiber to really develop and these markets to become more active. And on the grain side, there's significant demand for hemp seeds, hemp seed oil. Oil for CBD carrier will take up a great deal of the market. And then seed cake for livestock. There are unfounded worries about residual THC and hemp seed cake, so we need more research there. But the livestock industry historically has been able to utilize enormous amounts of byproduct from other industries. So that will be a great boon to the grain production and hemp. So there's a snapshot of the markets as we see it right now. One of the biggest challenges that we see are standards and specifications, particularly in reporting. Crude oil in particular, so biomass and isolate are fairly standardized. Biomass based on the percent CBD per pound formula, and isolate being a pure product is easily commoditized, but crude oil is not. Besides the various percentage of CBD concentration, there are various premiums, including more common ones, but maybe standard, winterization, decarboxylation, but also production standards, CGMP, ISO certifications, organic, and then of course the local or artisanal markets. And that's going to be a great option for these smaller producers that can direct market in this in the current market environment we're in. So there's a snapshot right there, and we'll open it up to questions.
All right. So using the webinar on the bottom of the screen, there should be a Q&A area for you to submit any questions you have, and we'll have Chase go ahead and answer those. For those that aren't on the Jacobsen Bulletin already, you can go in and check out a 14-day trial of the hemp report. So you can go in there and Chase updates the pricing information daily, and you get commentary with that as well. And it's a 14-day trial. So please check that out if you're not already on that. I don't see any questions popping in just yet. We'll give you another 30 seconds to drop them in. If not, Chase, do you have any more to add if we don't have any more questions here?
No, I think that, just essentially as far as the Jacobsen's reporting, the Jacobsen is in this for the long term. We're a 150-year-old plus company reporting on agricultural commodities. And so as these markets shift, as standards and specifications develop, the Jacobsen will be watching carefully so that we can anticipate this and move with them so that the information we're providing is timely and useful to you. Always open to feedback too. So if you have anything to add, things that you would like to see, we do anticipate reporting on distillates in the future, particularly, but again, those, as soon as we see enough liquidity and consistency there, we'll add those to our portfolio of commodities.
Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. If you have any questions, you can email Chase at chase.hubbard@thejacobsen.com, or you can email myself at george@thejacobsen.com, and we'll be happy to answer any more of your questions. Thanks again for your attendance, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks very much.
Chase.
Guys, have a good day.
Bye.